Wow, 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 and more wow. We are back in the studio. This is Dr. James Wadley coming at you with the Journal of Black Sexuality and Relationships podcast. And today is an awesome day. Not only is today an awesome day, but I got my mama here in the studio. And probably after the show, I'm going to have her come on, maybe drop a few bars for folks, let them know what time it is, bring that heat from the Midwest, and let her do her thing. But in the meantime, I have three wonderful folks who I've met over the years in many different components, in many different facets, and they are awesome for a number of different reasons. One of the reasons why they're awesome is because they are doing work in our communities, talking with kids and talking with teens and talking with parents and talking with people about sexuality. Yesterday, we had a provocative discussion about the role that fantasy has in social media and pornography as it affects kids of color and families of color. And today, we're going to talk about all the work that the folks at Pennsylvania Health Management Corporation and We Get to Choose Project, all the wonderful things that they do. So I would like our guests to go around the room and talk about how sensational, how talented, and how I have three once-in-a-generation professionals sitting here in the studio.
Yeah. All right, I'll go first then. All right, so hey, everybody. My name is Walter DeShields. Among other things, I am the lead facilitator of Brother Speak, which is a theater-based teen pregnancy prevention intervention for young black men in the city of Philadelphia, and also am an educator on We Get to Choose, WGTC, also at Public Health Management Corporation in Philadelphia. And both of these programs work with young people, generally between ages of 15 and 22. And we talk about sex and sexuality and communication and goal setting and just helping young folks navigate their way through their journey, their sexual health journey, among other things, how it relates to, the different other areas of their life.
Good. Yeah. Welcome, Walter.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And part of our story is that we ran into each other in Atlantic City a few moons ago.
Yes.
And Walter was one of the few black men in the audience, probably the only black men in the audience. And so we caught up with each other, and Walter is indeed a talent. And Walter, you also do some acting on the side?
Yeah. So I'm a professional actor.
Mm-hmm.
I get to do it just as much as I do, the sexual health work. And I get to bring it to this work, which is really unique and, the reason I'm still able to do it, because I get to marry those two passions. But yeah, I do a lot of theater work and a lot of film work. And thank you for making the introduction those years ago. Yeah. And you've kind of been a guiding light through this kind of journey. It's been really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. No pressure. Right.
Hey, everybody. I'm Carmelita Whitfield. I am the assistant director at for PHMC, and I have the pleasure of working with Walter and Marisha, who you'll hear next. In my role, I work a lot with the adults and doing adult sex ed. So my job is to kind of get the adults talking to the youth about sex positivity versus sex negativity. Mm-hmm. And I love what I do. Yeah. I really love it.
Good.
Great. Hi, and I'm Marisha. I'm lead health educator with PASHI, which that's the Philadelphia Area Sexual Health Initiative. Our team, we do a lot of work with young black kids. So I've been really fortunate to be able to work on a lot of different interventions, working specifically with young black girls, worked a lot with pregnant and parenting teens, and then a mix of black men and black women, all kinds of things. So yeah, the journey's been really exciting. I'm really fortunate to work with these individuals, and thanks again for having us. So.
Good. So the first question I have is share a little bit about WGTC and your role with WGTC and PHMC, but I think I want to reframe that to ask you something different. Tell me what's real about WGTC, and tell me what's real about PHMC, because, we can talk about, everybody does this and everybody does that, and it's too mechanical, it's too robotic.
Right.
So tell me what's real, whatever that looks like. So who'd like to go first?
Start.
Okay.
Me? Okay. Yeah, I'll start. Listen, I think it's a great way to reframe it. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm always talking about black folks. I'm always talking about young black folks and how we can help them navigate, their community, their city, their state, their country, how they navigate this world. And because it can be increasingly difficult. And a lot of the tools that they need aren't always at their hands. So, when organizations like PHMC come about and they get funding to have this program, and it's always important to make sure that there's a community voice there, and it's always important for the folks in the community that come on board to make sure or try to ensure that everybody involved is committed to the community. So when this opportunity became available, I knew it was something I'd do because, again, like I said earlier, it married some passions of mine. I used to be a teacher, so it married my education background. It also married my theater and film background. And so, and working with young men. I had developed other programs for young men in the past when I was a teacher. And so this was just a great opportunity to do that. Now, when I got into the role, I saw that there were opportunities to really give voice to the young people, give voice to black folks in Philadelphia. And I thought that was missing initially.
And you share a little bit about that voice that was given.
Yeah. So, Philadelphia is really its own kind of city. That's important to understand. And black folks in Philadelphia have a particular kind of experience. And I didn't know that the voice, that voice was being expressed, right? And certainly the voice of young black men. I think that right now it's in vogue to deal with some of the issues that young black men are facing. The problem is there aren't enough black men and young black men at the table to give their experience to really expand the knowledge base of that voice, right? So, we developed a youth advisory board. That wasn't my idea. That was a good idea that was set in place. But I really wanted to gear the voice of the youth advisory board, which consisted of young black men, ages 15 to 22 from around Philadelphia, to tell us what they would like to see a program like this do, right? What kind of people they want to talk to, what kind of messages they were interested in hearing. But also, importantly, because I say this a lot, as a former young black man from Philadelphia, I could also read between the lines. I understood some of the nuance of what young men were saying. Sometimes when we get into these researchy things, people write down what the young men say, and then they come back and they interpret it as a thing. And I'll listen to those interpretations and I think, no, you got it wrong. That's not what they saying. I know you heard the words that they said, but there is some nuance and characterization behind it. And you kind of need a translator to get that across. And myself and my colleague Costello and some other folks, and I called on you, like to kind of help me express to other folks that don't have that experience, this is what we really need to be talking about with young folks. So I wanted to help push that along. So I'm always kind of, pressing folks to stay true to that mission and that vision of really hearing what the young men particularly are talking about and ways that we can help improve their understanding of their own journey, right? But then letting them walk that journey too.
Good. Good. And the folks around you, are they open to listening to those stories?
Not always. I think the folks I work with directly are, right? So the Pashy team, which consists of Carm and Marisha and other folks, those folks are really, they get it. They mostly get it. But we work in a structure, right? So, our team is folks that kind of had the experience of the people we work with. But not everybody above that has had that experience. So sometimes it needs some explanation or bringing them into the knowledge base more so. Even if they won't ever have that experience, like they need to hear that voice. And so, sometimes it takes some pushing and I got to say things that ain't nice for everybody to hear, but that's all right. I'm the one to say it.
Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
All right. You too, Marisha, Carmelita, tell me what's real.
Yeah, so I would say just the entire process of developing this intervention, right, speaks to a lot of what Walt was, talking about. How are we going about making sure that the voices of the people that we're attempting to serve are being, at the forefront of the conversations we're having, right? And I think like even piloting the program, right? So, working through the sessions with the young people, and, there's the adult component too, which we'll be able to talk more about. But seeing the things that young people are concerned about and hearing them directly from them when you give them the space to discuss those things is really giving us a lot of insight, and is also helping to inform the institution within which we work, right? I think that they're starting to gain some clarity, right? Like, so we have a whole research, the kids, but also the institution that we work with. So, for example, we work very closely with our research and evaluation team, right? So we're out there facilitating, delivering the program. Research, they're starting to, I think, see how some of the things that you can't quite measure, right? The things that you can't, track metrics for and quantitative data for are the things that, we're out there giving to young people, but is making the most impact when you look at behavioral change or, how they're processing information. So for me, like this whole process of just learning how different aspects of the world and culture today are affecting the way that young people are viewing themselves, the way they're viewing sexuality, the way they're viewing relationships, the things they're being exposed to and how they're processing them. And one thing that just keeps coming up more and more and more is just this idea of mental health, right? And we're really seeing the tie-ins between like mental health, self-value, self-esteem, and how those are affecting the way that young people are dealing with their own sexual lives. And that's been a really interesting aspect for me. But a lot of this, goes back to things that you can't measure. You can't, you can't put a number to some of these things, but that's where the impact is.
Right. And so with those intangible things that you may be speaking of, how does one attach a dollar value to that? Or can there be a dollar value attached to that?
No. I mean, that stuff is invaluable to me. Like, being in those sessions and seeing and hearing some of the feedback. And you sometimes you see that light bulb go off, right? Where they make a connection, or like, Walt or one of our other facilitators, Miss Tiffany Bacon, they might tell a story, and you'll see the way it resonates with young people in a way that's different. There's also something to the environment that we create and the setting we create when we're in that room with those young people, right? Like those things you can't. Yeah, that's invaluable. I don't know.
But and I like to add, just very briefly, that there is a dollar value to it, right? There isn't because it's priceless, but there is because we got to do the work, right?
Right. And I was speaking more of like grant, getting funding for the work that you all are doing.
Absolutely. I mean, there should be more funding for it. Right. This the growth of these young people, benefit the country, right? And I don't mean that in any cliche way. Like, it benefits the health of the country, right? The mental, physical, social health of the country. And so, folks need to invest in that. Like, this country and these institutions need to invest in that.
So if I can, thank you.
Yeah.
And if I can say, with us doing the adult piece of this, where we're bringing the parents or the trusted adult into these sessions and working with them, because parents and adults don't know what they don't know, and they don't know how to ask the questions to get the information. And so we have to understand that our children, our parents are our first role models. And so when it comes to talking about sex, a lot of times what we hear when we reach puberty is, don't bring any babies here, or don't bring any babies home.
That's what my mama told me.
Yeah, right. I'm sure she did.
Right. Well, should have her in here. Like, Mom, why'd you tell me not to bring no babies home? But
there's no explanation to the why. And a lot of times these kids aren't even having sex yet. And so we like to take the parents or those trusted adults and give them the information so that they can have those conversations, real conversations with their youth. And sometimes the trusted adult isn't the parent. Right. And so whoever it is, we want to make sure that we can reach those people. If you have access to an adolescent between the ages of 14 and 19, right? And they're coming to you asking you information. Do I have all the facts? Do I know where I can get them? Do I even know how to put a condom on properly so that if somebody asks me, I can say, let me show you how to do it? right? So
No pun intended.
no, exactly. But yeah, that's
Pun
true.
intended. All right.
So what I really enjoy about the We Get to Choose under that umbrella is the Let's Talk Real Talk, which is where we then try to provide the adults some sex ed, right? And also come to it as a pleasure point, not a deficit. So we're looking at sex positivity, right? We're not stigmatizing. We're just saying, hey, here's some information. And a lot of times what we're finding is the adults are so appreciative and they're so hungry for this knowledge that, and we're doing a session now, and they're just overjoyed. They're like, we can't wait till our next one. So I really love the fact that I get to work with adults. They get to work with the youth as well as the adults, but I primarily work with the adults.
Good. And so with all the conversations that you all are having with kids or teens and their parents, what's the biggest challenge that's out there in facilitating these conversations and getting families to come to the table to talk about something that they normally don't talk about in their living rooms?
For me, it's time.
It's time?
It's time because we are allotted X amount of hours, but when you start talking to adults, it just unfolds. And it's like, oh my God, we still have so much work that needs to be done, but we can't just stop here because so many people have so many questions. So I'm hoping that this information that we're giving to them and that we're sharing, because it is transactional, that they're able to kind of take home, because we give them homework, right? And so we're like, we want you to go and talk to your youth if you feel comfortable, right? And then when we do our debrief at our next session, we talk about how that experience went. But for me, it really is just not having enough time to do all the work that needs to be done.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Time on a couple of levels in that respect too, because like we get into the conversations in the sessions, and if we snap a finger and it's over, like time is up basically. But adults, we're all adults here, having other commitments in our lives and making time to have this conversation. I like Let's Talk Real Talk, our adult part of We Get to Choose, so much because we get to bring adults in the room, parents in the room, right, and have these really complex conversations with them that many times they don't get to have. They haven't had a complex conversation like this since, college or grad school or whatever the case was, right? And sometimes ever. So it's really exciting to hear their ideas and they get really worked up. But, people got lives and stuff. So, having the ability to sit down and have these conversations with folks are rare. So I'm glad we do it.
Yeah, I would agree. I can echo what they're saying. It's the time thing. Even when you're working with the young people, it's like, again, just, trying to really flesh out the ideas. It takes time, even when we get to the end of the entire intervention, right? There's so much more unpacking that can be done and that they want to do. And so all you can do is just hope that someone's providing the space for them, that there's now someone else, whether it's a peer or something that can help them dissect a lot of the things, because we only get so much time with them, and that always is.
And if I can, the one thing I absolutely love about We Get to Choose and Let's Talk Real Talk is that it was created for us by us. And we don't have a lot of sex ed that's for us. And sometimes for the most part, we are very unique in our needs. Where, someone down the street might be able to go in and at any given time they can use their privilege or opportunity. Right. And so for us to have some work like this where it's really for our community, it's a beautiful thing. And I think it's very appreciated based on the evaluations and the feedback that we get from our evaluators or from the ones in the room.
Yeah, and actually I was going to reach into my satchel and pull out some hot sauce and ask you specifically what makes doing this work a challenge for Black folks, right? From the hood to where Black folks hang out at the restaurant over on South Street. I don't want to give out a shout out to anybody, but what makes it specific to melanin-oriented people?
Right. Well, you know what? There's a couple places you can go with that. First is the curriculum and material, written or designed for folks of color, right? For Black folks, right? That's the first piece, because a lot of it comes, I was dealing with a curriculum that was written by white women.
All right.
Right? And that's problematic for me, right? Because, again, there's some cultural touch points and touchstones that need to be addressed and that folks know. So is it designed from a perspective that Black folks understand and are familiar with? That's first thing important.
And for example, put your finger on it. You do the touchstone. An example might be what? That's particular to Black folks. So I'm developing this curriculum. I want it to be centered on people of color, Black folks, whoever. Put your finger on it. Right. So the white women, they wrote about this, and you were looking for this to happen.
Right. I was looking for, and because now we do it pretty well, I was looking for narratives that came directly from the experience of, in my case, the young men that we were working with.
Okay.
Right? Like, we need narratives from that point of view. So one thing, we talked about this morning in a meeting, one of the reasons our young men and other people jump into the sessions so well is because I share a personal story, right? About an experience as a young Black man when I was 15 or 16, right? About, something I did crazy as a teenager involved in sex.
And it sounds like something that they can relate to.
Yeah, they look at you like,
that.
man, well, I've been through that. Like, I'm going through that right now. That sounds like the thing. That's what's also important about theater and what we do, right? And now everybody can relate to this. You can go to a theater, you can go see a show, you can go see a movie, right? And you can enjoy the movie on its own merits, right? It's an action movie. It ain't about nothing special. It's just cars, guns, and all that other nonsense.
Right.
Or you can go see something that you see at home, right? So let's take the movie Soul Food, for example, right? Many Black folks saw the movie Soul Food and said, man, that's my home.
Right.
That's my big mama. That's my cousin. Like something that's designed to reflect an experience in your life so it can evoke a particular kind of conversation, feeling, emotion in you so you can reflect on yourself and then make the necessary change. Exactly. Right? That's important from the birth of an idea.
Right. And to add to that, what I would say, like what I was looking for, like what is that element that's missing, is when I think about unhealthy sexual behaviors, right, within our community, they are very directly tied to the way that you view yourself. And especially when I'm dealing with young Black women, right, it's a lot of it has to do with self-esteem, self-worth, and being able to speak up for myself in a sexual situation. Like all of those things are tied directly to, and I think we were at a conference once and there was a study, they were showing some data, and it was like maybe like 30 different causal factors, like what are the things that are contributing to like high rates of STIs amongst young Black girls. And one of the highest things on that list, it wasn't socioeconomic status, it wasn't, what's the highest level of education of the parent in the home, it was trauma. Trauma was one of the most closely associated things with, unhealthy sexual behaviors, as contracting STIs and things like that. And that's not something that any of these curricula, few, maybe there are some that I'm not aware of, but are really talking about, So why do we make, the name of it says it itself, we get to choose. So a lot of what we focus on when we're talking to young people is why is it that you make the decisions that you make?
Right.
What is it that attracts you and why is that? Not just saying, oh, I like this, I find, but why? Ask yourself the question. We can be more introspective, and I think that allows us to get to the root of a lot of the issues. You can try to attack things, like pull off the branches, but if we want to really get to the root of it, it has a lot to do with how we're processing things that we're, intergenerational even, So for me, I think that was a missing aspect that I'm happy to be able to bring to.
And also, just to not belabor the point, but also when you're looking at the Black and brown community, we are always the ones that have the highest whatever, diabetes, pregnancy, STIs, cancers. It's not saying that other people don't get those things. It's just that by the time we decide that we're going to make a choice or do something about it, then it's already, the prognosis is already like doom and gloom. So doing a program like this, if we can get the youth while they're young and help them to start making healthier decisions, right? perhaps that can break that cycle of whatever it is that's going on in their community or in their home. So I think that that's very important as well. Like, yeah, we have the highest, even though on a whole, teen pregnancy has decreased, but in the Black and brown community, it's still extremely high.
Right.
So, yeah, so I think that that's the other reason why a program like We Get to Choose is so important, because we get to talk to our young girls. We get to talk to our parents, and then in hopes that the two will come together and then start having dialogue, parents and then their children, because then that kind of could potentially break that cycle.
Good. So why is a program like this needed? And before you all respond, you all okay if I go Facebook Live? Shout out to Walter for giving us a tip for that.
Absolutely. I'm with it. I think it's a great
How's
idea.
my hair?
Y'all look good.
No, we good with Facebook.
All right. So why might a program like this be needed in cities around the country and maybe even around the world?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Listen, young folks is having sex. They talking about sex. You know what I mean? Like, they need to learn, right? This, when I talk to my own children, there's a couple different areas that, we got to have serious conversations about that don't necessarily get covered regularly in school, right? I was talking about money and finance, right? Sex and relationships, trauma and pain, like these kind of things. So, if this is a conversation that is going to affect their life, right? Their whole journey, this will be a part of it. And if we can't begin to have a conversation about it with a solid foundation, then it's going to harm them and have a negative impact and effect on them for the rest of their life. That's just the reality. So in every city, especially with Black folks and brown folks around, we have generations of trauma around solving these kind of, or dealing with these kind of issues, I should rather say, with religion, and, other kind of moral, norms that we've created that don't really get to the root of the thing. In fact, a lot of times what happens is it just kind of pushes it off to the side instead of really directly dealing with it. So in that case, these are conversations that might feel uncomfortable sometimes, but we need to have them. But I think if we have them early enough, then they aren't uncomfortable, because we're talking about ways to be healthy, right? Sex is normal, right? It is a part of your life. And so when we have conversations with our young men and women, we start from that positive place. Like, this is something you're supposed to be doing. We can talk about responsibility and when you're ready and your mental well-being and health around that. But this is something that we should absolutely be doing, and we don't have to have shame about that.
And exactly, there should be pleasure, right? So a lot of times we don't talk about pleasure because it's like, oh my God, if we talk about that, then they're going to be doing it, right? But kids are having sex. Yes. Parents, your kids are having sex, right? And if they can't talk to you about it, they're getting that information from their peers. Right. Or from the internet, or some other unhealthy place, right? This is not a judgment. It doesn't mean at all that, oh my God, I don't want to talk about this, because if I talk about it, then that means it's going to happen. But if you don't talk about it, it's going to happen, and other things will show up or manifest themselves. Right. So,
yeah, and I do think, just adding to what you saying, in terms of pleasure positivity, and is this needed? Well, clearly it's needed in other cities, and but just the way that the curriculum touches on this idea of sex positivity, I think that, especially, and again, I'll speak for young Black women, and Walt, you can speak more to young Black men. I like the way you do that.
And I speak for the old people.
Yeah, you speak for the old. Right.
Current is not old.
But the more and more that we're practicing it, and the more that we're seeing it be practiced, the more, we promote sex positivity, the more empowered, especially young women, are to speak up for themselves when it comes to sexual situations, I actually had a conversation once. I was at a conference, and one of these women, I got a chance to talk to a bunch of different women about their first orgasm, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the women was telling me that she was having sex, she had boyfriends, and she was having sex for, quite a period of time, and didn't think that she was physically able to have an orgasm. Mm-hmm. She didn't think it was supposed to be enjoyable for her. Mm-hmm. So for her, she was having sex for other reasons. She was having sex because she felt like her partner wanted to, because he wasn't going to really like her if they weren't doing that thing, but it wasn't for her, right? But if we can teach, young girls that, yes, this is what, it's okay to enjoy sex, this is how then you're more likely to speak up for yourself and say, hey, let's try this. Let's do it this way, right? And it's empowering, right? Because you can't really avoid, again, it's natural, right? But when you add that shame and that stigma to it, you see high rates of, assault, things like that. But it's just like, we have to talk about this in a different way, right? Sex is, we have sex for pleasure, like women, men,
exactly,
human beings.
And so here's the thing. What I'm thinking, because this conversation always comes up when we're facilitating, and that's the conversation around masturbation, right? And so do it.
Yeah.
It is so healthy and it feels so good, right? But we never talk about that.
Yeah.
And parents, and I know we did a cohort a couple of weeks ago, and one of the adults said that no one should masturbate, especially a married person, right? And you should not ever use toys. And I'm like, what the hell?
Right.
Exactly. But, I had to have my poker face, right? So I'm like, oh, Jesus, get me out of here. I was starting to get warm under the collar, right?
That's one of my issues. Like, we facilitate, and I kind of want to jump in with all my thoughts and opinions.
Right.
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
we're trying to help people walk this journey a little bit.
Right.
But, it's hard, especially in religious situations, when to talk about masturbation, or what do you do when you catch your kid masturbating, or what do you do if your kids catch you? So I think that we need to kind of have these real talks around, it's okay to masturbate. You're not going to go to hell. Jesus still loves you, or whomever you believe in that thinks that this is not a good thing, right? And tell our kids this, because there's a lot of shame and stigma wrapped around just masturbating. We're not even talking about having sex with somebody else. Right. This is me.
Right.
And I love me, but I'm ashamed to touch me.
Yeah. And I'd be remiss to not mention this part, because a lot of people listening to this might have this kind of experience. When we can talk to young people about sex sooner, we can deal with a lot of the issues around sexual assault in our communities, rape and trauma, because it happens often. And for a long time, I just think it was completely ignored, right? And so young people grow up with all of these feelings of confusion, and they see sex negatively. And because they haven't had a space to talk about it in any way, right? Much less in this very traumatic way. And, as we know, a lot of these incidents happen when people are young, and then they carry that into an adulthood. And then, we don't know the trauma that the parents are carrying around. And so then, they try to come together to figure it out, and there's no way to figure it out because there's so much embedded pain. So we need that conversation for these reasons too. We might could get young people talking about an experience that was inappropriate, right? Or at least with a licensed counselor and trusted adult therapist or whatever, so we can get that out. And I don't want to forget that part, because I know we sit in rooms with young people sometimes, and we don't, especially as we meet them, we don't know them personally, we don't know their history, and we often think about what might be triggering, so we kind of pay attention for those kind of signs. But this conversation is necessary for that too, right? So we can start opening those closets.
So then, as related to the question, the conversations that you all are having here in Philadelphia with teens and their parents could also happen in other cities basically around the world, because there is a pervasiveness of sex negativity. There is a pervasiveness of people just not talking about sex. Now, I'm going to reach into my satchel again and pull out my Old Bay seasoning.
Please.
So why don't black folks talk about sex? What's real?
Trauma.
Yeah, shame.
Yes.
Guilt, shame,
All of those
embarrassment,
things. Yeah.
just not knowing.
Right.
Right.
Just not knowing. Yeah. Bad experience.
I
mean, just regular bad experience. Like, it ain't good, so I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
That kind of thing. When you get something from the wrong place, you know what I mean? Initially, it's just humanity. It's not something you want to reflect on, And if that happens a few times in a row, then you completely shut that down. Like, that's not something we want to deal with, Of course, religion is the big thing, I think, for a lot, especially black folks. We are a religious people. It's been passed down for us some centuries now, and we take that very seriously. And so when you kind of got that kind of dogma around, and you hear that, say, you still go to church every Sunday and all of that, and you're getting these kind of messages from people that you really respect and you feel like are messengers of your God and Savior, then you certainly, it's going to hinder your growth. I think a lot of us come of age somewhere in our 20s, and we kind of got to deal with, what we see and feel as real life people here versus what we've been taught and damn near brainwashed with over, our time here on this earth, right? Yeah. And so, if that's the kind of experiences that we're dealing with, then folks, they not going to want to talk about that, or they don't know how to talk about that. They don't have the language. I mean, this ties into a couple of things. We don't talk to therapists enough and all those other things. And add that, then, folks really are having these conversations. Then folks going to have kids, right? Because black folks going to have some kids. Right, and
as we should.
Right,
shout out to all baby mamas in the world.
That's right. You know what I mean? I got 4 of them. You know what I mean? And you don't not have those conversations. So when I say things, and I say stuff like this all the time. So if this is your first time hearing me talk, this might shock you. I asked my daughter, my 19-year-old daughter, "You masturbating? What's up?
Come on, Dad. Come on, Dad."
Because if you don't know, how he gonna know?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So we have really open conversations about this kind of stuff, and I don't need to be in her business. It's not for that. And I'm not saying that it always makes me comfortable. It doesn't, because I was conditioned a certain way, so I'm still breaking out of that shell too, even to this day. And so, but I gotta ask because I want her to function in a way that makes her feel comfortable. Again, I had the same questions about what your bank account look like. You know what I mean? You saving? You know what I'm saying? What's your diet look like? I think we prioritize and we create a hierarchy on our needs as if you can't look at them all equally. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think what I would add to that is another reason why I think we're not really talking about it. I think that lack of access to certain aspects of education and resources, because I think if Black people understood the importance of talking about sex with their young people, I know Black people, they don't want to see their kids go through the same things that they had to go through. It's not like we're intentionally perpetuating this trauma and passing this down. I think we would make a lot more of an effort if we had access to the same conversations, that, for example, I'm able to sit and have with Walt and Carmelita, all that kind of stuff. But I think if they understood, even when we're doing the Let's Talk Real Talk sessions, you see how when they understand how, yes, if I can give my child this information, they will actually be healthier. They'll do it. I think it's that stigma, that idea that if I teach them about sex, they're going to want to have sex, or they're going to want to do more.
And Carm, you can talk about this because this is real right here. Mm-hmm. Fear, fear. So when we talk about these conversations, especially with adults, and this is why I sit in on the adult conversations, I love it the most, because when we start talking about SOGIE, S-O-G-I-E, you can tell.
Wait, hold on.
That's a whole.
What's SOGIE? Yeah. Wait, hold on. Help me out.
Sexual orientation, gender identity expression.
Thank you.
Right? Yeah. Like Marsh said, if I talk about it, then it might be real. Right? So, Carm, you can talk about how we get into those conversations around orientation and identity expression.
Oh, my God.
And how people scared of that.
We are scared of it, right? I don't want to know if my kid is gay. I don't want to know who they're sleeping with, because if I don't know, then it's not real, right? And so when we're talking to adults, and they don't know how to label it either, so it's like, well, what do I call if they're a transgender person? What do I call? Just call them a person. And they can't wrap their mind around this. And it's so, because we do this work every day, it's sad for me because I don't have enough time, right, to sit down and just do that thorough education. I'm only limited to whatever the clock is. But there is so much fear wrapped around their identity, our identity, and it's baffling.
And I get, there's confusion, right? And you just don't understand. It feels like things are changing every day. We hear that a lot, right? Yeah. Right? And things are moving quickly. Folks have always existed. You right? Transgender folks have always existed. We might have updated the language or whatever the case is.
No, they didn't come about with RuPaul's Drag Race.
Oh,
Well,
you would think, right?
no, I remember Miss Candy. So, and back then there was another term used for a transgender person, but I remember like Miss Candy and
always been around.
had a full 5 o'clock shadow.
How about that?
But was
and
just
everybody knew.
Beautiful.
Everybody got a cousin. That's
Everybody.
gay.
Everybody.
Lesbian, queer.
Everybody.
Like everybody.
Everybody has someone in their family that's queer.
And it got to the point where I just thought it was so ridiculous that on Thanksgiving, all the memes come out and they talking about Auntie come over with her best friend. Like we created other alternate language to not try to deal what is a clear reality. We're not different than any other community. That's
Play cousin.
Right. And for the last 20 years.
Right.
So that's her neighbor. She just like to come over with Auntie.
Like to come over.
That's her neighbor. Right.
So we really do deal with it. We don't want to talk about it. When we got to talk about it. So when we get into this conversation, how do we talk about it in relative to folks' kids?
So I also just wanted to share that in my research, when my dissertation is lived experiences of African American women, premenopausal African American women with advanced breast cancer, right? So in talking with my study participants, 80% of them said that it was their partner that found their lumps. We don't even touch ourselves. Right. We've never looked at, for the most part, I'm not going to take a mirror and look at my, vagina, or I can't name my parts, right? And that's real talk. It's like we're so afraid of touching ourselves or letting someone else touch us that we miss a huge part of this education. So if I can't touch myself or explain what these parts do, right? How can I really talk to my children about what's going on with their body? How do I explain their period more than just don't bring, you can have babies, just don't bring no babies home, right? So what we do in Let's Talk Real Talk is when we're doing the anatomy, right? We have the adults to name, to the best of their ability, those parts, internal and external anatomy, male and female. And you'd be surprised how many people don't know what's going on in their own bodies. Right. So I just think that this program does such a wonderful service to the community at large, but for us as well, because then we can take what we're gathering from the audience that we're working with and then kind of turn that back around and make those teachable moments and then kind of push that back out there. So I'm really, really happy with the work that we are doing with We Get to Choose and Let's Talk Real Talk.
All right. We're running out of time. And before we close, can you all share one unique experience that you've had in the project as it relates to being a sex educator, or it could be personal, it could be professional, just one unique experience that you've had?
It's so many, so I feel like there's so many a collection. I think generally, so in Brother Speak, we meet with our young men 4 sessions we try to do it 4 straight days. And, like with most people, certainly young black men, you meet them the first day and they like, man, I don't know you. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard, getting them out of that shell. And by the 4th session, almost always, these brothers are like, listen, how can we keep this conversation going? How can we keep talking? That's evidence and proof that, young men want to have this conversation. They want to know more about themselves. They want to know how themselves relate to the surrounding world, how they could better talk to their partners and their families, and how, going forward, what a family for them looks like, all these different things. And I always find that really amazing and astounding. We've been working with some young men. So one of our actors in the Brother Speak project, he was 17 when he came on. And he was really a sharp young man. We brought him on as an actor. He was graduating from high school. And in the spring, he's graduating from college. He's graduating from Westchester. And so he's been kind of helping us facilitate this program for the last 4 years. And we watched him grow. His name is Jordan Jackson White.
Shout out to my
Jordan.
Fellow Greek.
Yeah. He's a cute. We was at his probate. We going to his graduation. Like, he gave my daughter a tour. All the Greeks is in the building. Shout out to Beta Phi Pi. So, you know, these kind of experiences, seeing young men grow this way, like we know we can give them the opportunity to grow outside of like the traditional classroom. Right. You know, and then they grow as better people all the way along across the spectrum. So
good. Unique experience?
Yeah, I'd say some of the things that, you know, after going through the intervention that young people are willing to share. Like there was one point where I had one young student and she had come up to me with a sticky note. And she was like, it just read like, I think I'm ready to lose it. And at first I was like, girl, who you mad at? I'm thinking like she's going to lose her mind, thinking she's, you know. But she's like, Miss Marsh, I think I'm ready to try this. I think I want to do. And like for me, that was a pivotal moment because her as someone who, just as a young person coming into themselves, the fact that she was willing and able to share that with me allowed me to give her the resources and advice to move forward with that in a way that she might not have felt comfortable talking to any other adult in her life about that. But that can be, I mean, that can go so many different ways. So I was like, one, I kind of became like a trusted adult in that scenario, but it's just like, when you open that door and young people feel willing and able to talk to you, you can really change like the fact that she was willing to have that conversation. Hey, I'm ready to lose my virginity. Like, let's talk about that. Like that is, because we can all go back to some of our first experiences. For some of us, we didn't know what was going on, what we were doing, but the fact that she was able to get that insight and ask for it, like you can really help someone in a way that's just, you just never know. So
for me, I frame that around our students, clients, constituents. They literally offer us a gift, and that gift comes through the conversation, and that gift, more often than not, hasn't been given to anybody else that they've ever encountered in their lifetime. So when they share with us about life, love, and happiness, you know, sometimes I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
Now, I won't say that to them, but I'm like, damn. The person shared about their relationship. The person may have come out to me. The person may have said whatever, but it truly is a gift.
Mm-hmm. And for me, I think that it's just having those aha moments with the adults when they figure it out, like, okay, this might work. Right. I'm willing to take a chance, right? I want to be that person to my young person. Right. So for me, it's just them, again, allowing us into their life, them sharing their stories, and trusting us enough with their stories. Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so before we close, one last shout out. How can folks find you? Social media, in the streets? What? How can folks find you?
Well, on social media, everything is Walter DeShields, WalterDeshields. That's me on Twitter. That's me on Instagram. You can look me up on Facebook, WalterDeshields.com. So I'm a professional actor, so a lot of the work that I do is you'll see, you know, me promoting something on stage or something in film or what have you. But also, especially in this world, if there's a need for, you know, talking to young men about sex and sexuality, then bring me out. I'm willing to travel. How do young people say it? Flew me out? I got flued out? I'm trying to get flued out.
I have no idea what that means.
Hold on, not in no DC-10s.
No.
Walter only accepts rides in these 747s.
That's right.
And I'm going to shoot shout out to my dude, Mike Courts, out there in California.
What up, Mike? Yeah. Mike, this is Mike to fly me out. Shout out to Tanya Bass. This is her shirt, Sex Educator.
Yes.
Good. All right. Tanya's cool peeps, too.
Yep.
Oh, well, I'm very rarely on social media, but I will give you all the We Get to Choose page. So you can definitely follow us on Facebook. We Get to Choose. The project's also on Instagram. We Get to Choose. That's it. And you can follow us. You'll start to see us posting some of the work that we're doing. But through those pages, you can also get in touch with us if you have any questions about the program itself. You want to get an intervention with your young people. We offer great incentives and food, so that's also great. Yes. Young people love that. But yeah, we're willing to come out, and talk to young people about anything. But
and they're adults.
Yes, and they're adults, you know. So just whatever you need, we've got you right here. So, yes.
Right.
I don't do social media.
Why don't you give me your phone number?
Call me up on the phone. I have a flip phone.
Yeah. Add me on
house
LinkedIn.
phone.
Marisha Marsh, LinkedIn.
Oh, yeah,
Very
LinkedIn.
easy,
There
right?
you go.
Marisha Marsh.
Carmelita Whitfield, PhD.
Yep, there it is.
I don't have a LinkedIn. I'm an actor.
There
Yeah.
you go. See?
That's my headshot.
Right.
And this is Dr. James Wadley closing out with this session. As I mentioned, I got 3 once-in-a-generation talents around me. Black folks willing to travel near and far to do sex ed work and consultation. I'm hoping that we can come back and do this again. And again, thank you so much. And we're going to get these links together and get ready for the next episode. All right, folks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.